Okay, I have learned my lesson. From now on, it's just one cat at a time. So here is Max with the 4 white boots. Max is an adorable cat who his biggest fear is people in coats because people in coats take her to the vet. So she hates them. All right, thank you, Max. If you'll remember, last week we talked about accompaniment. So the process of mutually engaging in a respectful relationship with our client to determine the action needed to engage in change or treatment to achieve the goals that the client wants to achieve. And we do this by sharing our power with the client and engaging in collaboration with them right through to the end. Here are some examples now of how that actually happens in practice. So the first is just therapy. It is a way of doing therapy using the just practice framework. It's grounded in 3 core concepts: belonging, sacredness, and liberation. So it recognizes the fact that the client belongs within the decision-making process as much as the social worker. And sacredness refers to the acknowledgement of spirituality as a critical component within the change process. So that might be religion, that might be social support networks, or other ways that we and our clients have to build ourselves up and engage in coping. And lastly, there's liberation, wherein the issues that have been impeding our health or mental health are addressed. It's all about challenging professionally imposed meanings of problems. So going back to a couple weeks ago when we talked about strengths-based assessments, instead of focusing on the problems, we focus on the issues that result in these problems past the individual, so that we can engage in not just a power analysis, but also recognizing that there is a deep social pain that's going to be experienced by marginalized people as a result of colonial mentality that's so ingrained in so many of the helping systems. And a lot of these helping systems have also been responsible historically for causing trauma to these populations. So it requires an examination of how the problem is defined, but also how in the past the organization might have contributed to the problem, and acknowledging that and bringing that forward to the center of your consciousness, right? The consciousness raising aspect, acknowledging it and going from there with the client. Another approach is the empowerment approach. So we've briefly touched on this before. Again, this is empowerment with the goal of increasing personal, interpersonal, and political power, not the social media trend where engaging in capitalist practices like shopping or going to the spa is an empowerment tool. Here is a good example of actual empowerment at work with the issue of climate change and how it's going to impact rural women. So we look first at climate change awareness raising for social workers and for the population that's impacted. And we educate the population and develop with them strategies for how this problem can be addressed in a way that supports the best practices and roles of these women. And then we monitor and evaluate that what we did actually works, and if need be, we start again and do another project to implement more policy or practices that will help this population with the population. So we assume responsibility to participate in this change process, and we enhance the self-efficacy of, in this case, the rural women, to be able to also engage in their own political activism and reduce their self-blame for things that are outside their control, like for instance prolonged droughts that are going to impact their ability to engage in agriculture or farming, and view that within the climate change lens. Other action strategies that you can take through the empowerment approach is building the relationship based on collaboration, trust, and power, accepting the client's definition of the problem. Don't impose your own definition of the problem. Or you can also come together to develop a mutual definition. You need to identify and build on strengths. So the empowerment approach is very much complementary to the strengths-based approach. And you raise the consciousness about the intersecting forms of difference and power. So help the group understand what external forces might be contributing to their oppression that need to be addressed in order for them to have self-efficacy. You need to teach specific skills. So that's part of that power sharing. You social workers have an education and a skill base that your client population doesn't. So by sharing these skills and teaching clients how to use it themselves empowers them and shares that power within the helping relationship. And lastly, mobilize resources and advocate for change. So you as a social worker will have very frequently more power than the clients you work with, and can have more power when you're advocating, especially if you have the power of your organization behind you and their resources. So I briefly mentioned strengths-based practice. This is very similar to the empowerment approach, but it focuses not so much on encouraging mobilization of a particular group to focusing on an individual or one family at a time and their community. So that could be listening to their story, acknowledging their pain, and then looking for strengths within what you're hearing, pointing out the strengths to the family so that they can then create linkages for themselves. Oh, I've done this before, I can do this again. And find opportunities for them within their community to be leaders and peers for those around them, to promote strength within their community as well, so that this again, very in line with empowerment. You're empowering the family, and then the family can then go on to empower those within their community. A great example of an empowerment, or strengths-based approach is graffiti. So it can very much be viewed as a strength instead of just a social blight, because it spreads awareness of social issues and can be very successful in drawing attention to social issues. I love this quote, I believe from Banksy: "If graffiti changed anything, it would be illegal." And it is. It's very much illegal because it does have the power to change. Art very much has the power to change, and graffiti should be viewed like that, in my opinion, and not as a crime. So consider how you could employ the empowerment or strengths-based practice with some of the cases that we've covered this semester. For instance, with James, the person with the mental health issues who tried to admit themselves to the ER and couldn't because they were overloaded. Or perhaps with Doreen, who was had mental health issues because she was experiencing employment discrimination and did not have any access to fresh water. So, for instance, an empowerment approach could be to work with Doreen and her community and advocate for safe drinking water on reservations. Or a strengths-based approach could be to band together with other practitioners and researchers within the field of employment discrimination and address that either through the courts or through the Employment Discrimination Tribunal. So building on the strengths of others in your network to help Doreen. All right, so the second last type of action we're going to cover is restorative justice. So this is both a theory and a movement to promote the healing for victims, offenders, and communities after a crime has occurred, instead of focusing like the current approach, which is very punitive and really focuses on the crime, the rules that have been broken, instead of the harms of the crime that was committed. So by engaging in restorative justice, we ask questions like who's been hurt, what their needs are, and whose obligation is it to meet those needs. So it recognizes both the responsibility of the offender and the responsibility of the community to help the victim. It has aspects such as restitution for the victim, as well as restitution for the community. And the community itself provides victim support for the victim. And then together, the three come together for things like peace circles, family group conferencing, or community conferencing. And through these mechanisms, a plan of action is developed that meets the needs of all three groups. It, of course, requires very skillful facilitation by social workers to ensure that the process is not harmful for victims, offenders, and communities. And the last form of action we're going to talk about is participatory planning. So that involves incorporating the community or the stakeholders within any advocacy or policy action that we're going to do. So we work with the stakeholders and the community members to determine what is the situation that we want to address, who needs to be involved, what outcome do we desire, how are we going to accomplish this, what is the path that we're going to take, and what is our overall plan. And there's an example here in the picture, and the way that participatory planning works is everyone comes together and engages in consensus building. So for instance, once possible objectives have been developed, everyone in the group gets a certain number of colored sticky notes, and they place those sticky notes at the objectives that they feel most strongly about, so that we can narrow down the frame of focus to the one pathway that we're going to take in order to complete the action plan. And what this does is it very much incorporates the community within the political advocacy process, so that they are as much within the decision making and the action planning as the social workers. In summary, today we covered 5 different action tasks. They were the empowerment approach, the strengths-based approach, the restorative justice, and participatory planning. The textbook lists a few more that you'll want to read about to become more familiar with them.